Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 296 with Mike Stratta. This is a EduWeb recap sort of episode as well. I met Mike at EduWeb recent conference and just really wanted to talk more with him. I wasn't able to record on site, but followed up and got this set up just to get some insights on the event from him and to also have him share his reflections on the work that he is doing at Arcaléa marketing agency, bringing in more conversations centering on AI and its impacts on marketing, focusing a bit more in this conversation on attribution. So really great insights, really great perspective. Stay tuned for all that goodness coming up here. Appreciate you listening to this episode number 296 with Mike Stratta. Yeah, really grateful for this time together where, we're building off of kind of crossing paths at the recent EduWeb Summit. So we'll talk a bit about that, but also just kind of have brief interactions with folks from your team and just really excited to kind of, learn more myself and share with our audience more about what Arcaléa does. So if you want to kick us off as we usually do, just a brief introduction of you, your background, and the work that your organization does.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate it, Dustin. It's pleasure to be here with you and get a chance to chat a little bit about it. So my name is, again, Mike Stratta, CEO of Arcalea. Founded it about 10 years ago this year after having a really frustrating run helmed another agency. We sold it. And the inciting incident for me was I was sitting with a Fortune 500 C-suite, and they turned to us after a year's worth of work and said, "Great, Mike, what can you tell us about the impact to the bottom line?" And as a marketer, we didn't typically deal in the bottom line. We dealt in top line. And so it was super frustrating. In the next few moments, I was doing one of these, what happened was, and here's how we see it, and clicks and view throughs. But we couldn't answer the question. And at that moment, I said, you know what? I've either got to go carve canoes for a living, or I have to change how we approach marketing. That's kind of how Arcalea got started and what we do today.
That was like one thing that stood out to me was I think that kind of analytical mindset or perspective that you're bringing to this work, as I think kind of transitioning to EduWeb and kind of focusing in on your work kind of in this space, there were a lot of marketing agencies at EduWeb and everything. So it's obviously there's room at the table for everybody kind of bringing their own flavor. But I think that was really distinctive to me. So I think, I don't know, just with your, your all's kind of positioning and being at the EduWeb Summit, any reflections on the event, some highlights, just kind of if you want to just share a little bit of kind of how you all showed up, and then just any reflections on your experience kind of interacting with folks that are in the higher ed space.
First of all, it was a super fun event, and that's one of the things that stood out is not every event, not every conference you go to is fun. And I was fortunate to be on kind of the planning committee this year, and so I attended a number of planning sessions and got to know some of the other vendors as we call them. We don't like to use the word vendor. We just like trusted partner or something along those lines. But no, it was one of those that we knew going in there'd be a wide swath of opportunity from different vendors, and we got to be fairly close with a lot of them and got to know them. And actually, we're now talking partnerships with several walking away. So I think one of the insights was just the wide variety of players, some familiar topics, but new spins powered by AI. And I think that was kind of the theme of this year was there's just so much that was powered by AI, either natively or as a bolt-on. And it was just intriguing and interesting to kind of see the range of opportunity now. That's before not only higher education, but the various industries in general.
Yeah, I think that, it was just like kind of good vibes. I mean, obviously there's like a lot of turbulence and ambiguity in higher ed right now. And I think that obviously is, powering some people's kind of curiosity about like what they should do next and all that. But I think at least like, I mean, it was a great place, Portland, Maine in July. Like it was a good place to be and a good time of year to be there. And I think people enjoyed that. And then just, for me, I mean, it was my first time at the event. And I think obviously it's something that's always really great about higher ed is this sort of like collaborative spirit, knowing that like, we're doing work that really matters. And, in different lanes, it's obviously a different nature to this, but like in my mindset sometimes is like, we're all on the same team. Like we're trying to have like a more educated, populace and, better citizens and everything else, like we all kind of win if more people are pursuing, whatever education journeys they are seeking. So I think that idea of that, like you can go and, get a lot of good different partnerships, clients, whatever, like just that it could be fruitful in so many ways of either just like it was a good time to be in community with colleagues. And then we also got things that I think will like, keep driving forward good work and everything. So I'm curious just from your perspective too, because I think you have like a really interesting background and knowing that you kind of work across, I think, a lot of different kind of verticals and things like from especially just reflecting on like EduWeb, obviously that was, all these folks that are working, at institutions and, marketing their programs and everything else, and the folks that are supporting them to do that work. Like, do you see like the struggles for higher ed when it comes to like digital marketing in particular, which obviously is happening in the context of everything else going on, but like, do you see that being unique? Like the struggles when it comes to digital marketing, is that unique right now for higher ed because of maybe all those other factors, or is everybody kind of grappling with all the like AI stuff and everything else, like, at the same time and kind of in the same ways?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. I tend to look at it in two perspectives. One is, yes, there's some uniqueness to higher education. The way that the news cycles are falling, the anticipation of some of the current administration's decision making is going to greatly impact a lot of players, and that was one of the things that was missing from this. From the context of the dialogue, really. And it happened at dinners, it happened in the hallways, but it was like, what is going on, right? Just from political atmosphere. But that has an effect on strategy and tactics internally, probably an outsized effect, which is the reason I bring it up, is it was pointedly missing from the dialogue, at least openly. The way I look at it is there's two facets. There's the systematic, there's the idiosyncratic. The systematic are the things that are happening across all markets, right? That happen, that affect us all. AI is one of them. It transcends any given market. And then you've got your idiosyncratic challenges, and that's kind of what I just spoke about with the administration, et cetera. And I think there are some of it's the same and some of it's changing at a lightning speed. Data maturity is finally catching up with the ambition of the industry, because the industry tends to lag a little bit, partly because of the matrix environment of decision making, partly because it just tends to lag for any number of factors. And really, it's the matrix part of it is a big drag, but it's also got ambitions. To your point, I mean, it's cause related. We're looking forward and we're saying like we have to accelerate this because the future of the very lifeblood of the intellectual capital of our society is predicated on us mastering this with speed, right? And to be able to pass that on and set the next generation up for success. And I think there's a sense of urgency about that right now, not only in the general dialogue, but within higher education, especially. We're all looking at this and saying, look, we have to master this and bring it to the students. So I think all of that is kind of the backdrop of what is generally a very awesome. This is my first time at EduWeb as well. And I went in kind of not knowing what to expect. We were a little bit of a late addition, and we came out just saying like, wow, I have to do this next year. And I want to plan my next trip, and being in Portland doesn't hurt, right?
That's always what's interesting, I think, with like conferences and stuff, is just sort of like, okay, what is like the energy or the mindset, or like, there's certainly like different cultures to different events and stuff of just sort of like, that's kind of the foundation. But then like whatever the moment when this event happens, and certainly could be like, look, like all these other kind of like little factors sort of play in of like, are people operating from a place of like, kind of complacency or fear or excitement or whatever, and like, it's all gonna, I think, marble into different extents, in any given moment and stuff. But I think, I'm very grateful. It felt like folks were very curious, very forward looking, and like that. Then like someone like you from a very different kind of vantage point, because I was just there kind of like hanging out and podcasting with people and whatever else, but like that you also felt like it was fruitful and productive and like helpful to be in that space and everything. And I think, it's one where I think I just enjoy being in those kind of the digital marketing and higher ed kind of spaces too, just with like kind of, my unique kind of nature of being like a content creator and everything. But I think, and I think even that kind of like level setting where there's like a good bit that is unique to higher ed in this moment, acknowledging that requires sort of different sort of how do you sort of meet that? And then on the other side, it's like things are just kind of crazy with just sort of like, AI, how it's sort of kind of integrating into marketing and changing the nature of like, search
Everything.
and different things like that. Like
Yes.
that's always kind of a big thing for me. So yeah. But I think if you had to put a finer point on it, how is AI impacting the nature of your work? I don't know if it's like you're feeling it more or have been recently around like even just like your operations, just like running the organization, or if it is like, oh yeah, we've had to make a really big pivot because we're doing a lot in SEO and that's just kind of changing because you're getting all those like AI summaries and that, just you kind of have to like kind of adjust a bit for that. Like, just curious. Yeah. Like, we can sit with this one for a bit, but like, how is AI impacting the nature of your work?
Yeah, it first of all, it's been fundamental. I speak to Vistage, which is a business group for CEOs, and I've been speaking for the last 3 years to Vistage leadership groups. And 2.5 years ago, I was traveling around and sharing like, here's how AI affects business. Here's how to kind of think about it. And I was almost regarded as this shiny object of just, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what that means. And like, we were kind of doing mini demos of ChatGPT at the time. And it was like, can't you see, look at how this will change. And in just 2.5 years, it's fundamentally changed in a way that we couldn't have even imagined it 2.5 years ago. Never before in human history has that kind of change occurred in society, let alone business. And so now leaders, just like we experienced at EduWeb, leaders are now saying, well, yes, I've played with it. Yes, I can see the power of it. Yes, we have to integrate it. But how? And I think we're just kind of getting to the edges of just how impactful it is. The current dialogue, if you listen to leaders, and like every morning I try and tune into like what the latest, news cycles are and what the latest leadership is saying. And the dialogue is that this is affecting CEOs too. Even a CEO can be replaced by AI. And I think that kind of rhetoric is established a bit of a wake up call for everyone first. And so everybody's kind of looking over their shoulder and saying, well, is it my job as well? And like, if so, and if not, and then you've got people falling on these two different camps, right? You've got the early adopters and like, I'm all in, like I get it. And then you've got some who are like, I don't want to do that just yet. I'm a human being. And like, there's all kinds of psychological, considerations along the spectrum of employee and owner and manager, et cetera, and how this is all going to fit. And I think to your question of how it's affecting us is yes, right? It's happening on client side. It's happening in tactics. It's happening to elevate strategy. It's happening and that's just from a services perspective. It's happening within the organization from an efficiency perspective and almost just an improvement. I hate that we're putting everything in this efficiency bucket of the rhetoric now is, you can replace employees with AI. And I think that we need to move that rhetoric to, we can improve our opportunities. We can be more efficient at what the employees do, not at the employee level. And then that's all beside what we're doing in our product. And our product is actually uniquely benefited from AI in that, we couch Galileo in this old school concept of it being multi-touch attribution. It is really more than attribution. Attribution is an aspirational concept of saying, aha, I figured out the thing that actually moved the needle. When in truth, it's the many things that move the needle. And what AI allows us to do is to use machine learning to see patterns in the customer journey, in the student journey that we could never before, that it took weeks or months before with the data scientist team to say, all right, let's set up these models, let's run the data, let's garner insights and take it back to the team, et cetera, which can now be done in seconds. right? And I am not exaggerating. It can now be done in seconds. And so having the data to be able to run attribution, if that's what we're calling it, if it's really pattern recognition on a mass scale of what it takes to provide value to students, to get them to matriculate. But if we can run that in seconds, now the question is, do we have the right data? And to our earlier points of matrix environments and slow to market, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily that in higher education, we are half step back, because we get to say, you know what? We know our prime objective. We know what data it will take to get there. Now let's bring that to bear in our ecosystems from a marketing perspective, but a customer journey and student journey perspective. And then let's apply the right things to get the right outcomes. And I think that's one of the benefits. If you've been a little bit behind, you get to kind of look and see what the world is doing and say, all right, these are the 3 things that we're going to implement now because we know they work, not because we're bleeding edge and trialing. I don't think higher education is not really set up for the waste that can come with bleeding edge. They need to take the best practices and move from there, because they have greater scrutiny than perhaps some private institutions on their capital usage.
You're kind of saying initially of like, you're in a group with like CEOs, these high performing executives, top of their organizations and everything. But like, even just like taking a moment to like sit and just demo ChatGPT and everything. Cause I think it's, kind of talking about like, all right, we're going through a disruptive moment. Some people are just going to like stick their heads in the sand and kind of just try to ignore things or, not really kind of interface with it. But other folks, there's going to be maybe like a germ of curiosity, but then it feels like intimidating. They don't know really where to start. And that you could just be kind of demoing something. And I think ChatGPT, that's part of, I think, why it's been so kind of appealing or kind of pervasive, is that like, it can start really simple, and then you can start to sort of extrapolate all this sort of like possibilities and stuff like that. And so I think it's such a great kind of gateway for folks, and just even kind of doing that. And, because I guess embedded in it is sort of the acknowledgement of like, yeah, this is disruptive. It's like a really new thing. It's happening really quick. Let's just start here. And then, maybe, you can kind of extrapolate from there how you might see it being beneficial to. And I think that's like the key kind of word choice, because I think, words matter, of like improving what we're doing, not just being like efficiency ruling all things or whatever. Like, I think it is just, it's improvement. It's augmenting, it's supplementing, it's sort of, just reaching that kind of full potential. I think it's really well positioned for that. And even just like you're saying, like the speed of which then, like very kind of specifically and tactically for you and your organization's work, like you could be getting insights to people quicker, so that they know like, okay, like we can lean into what's working, try to fix the things that aren't, around kind of, how students are learning about us and taking action to apply and kind of, getting through all that. So I think it's just like being able to do that analysis. Like, I think that's core to like what I've been resonating a lot with, is that like we're able to now meet this moment to do analysis so much quicker, so that people aren't just like making decisions. Like, one, they can make decisions quicker, but then they can make decisions that aren't just based on assumptions and anecdotes and whatever else. So I think, I don't know if that's sort of like kind of the goal and or sort of the outcome that you're seeing, is that like you can then sort of be like, okay, I've got the evidence here. We can now start building a strategy based on a shared sort of common understanding and foundation and stuff. Like, is that kind of how it often kind of goes for you, of like you can do this analysis quicker, and then you're able to sort of like have more informed discussions with your like ed leaders?
You nailed it 100%. Even so, a couple of things is there's always, and we liken this to Moneyball. And I love the film and the book. The film's better than the book, but I love it because it establishes first. I don't know if you've seen Moneyball. Have you seen it, Dustin? There's a room of scouts, and they're all talking about baseball players, and they're all using these kind of colloquialisms of just, this is how, like, he's a good player, he's got a good face, and he's 6 feet tall, and like this is why he's going to be good. And it underscores there's about 30 biases in that particular scene that are present that we all use on a daily basis, and that is the in lieu of having the trusted data, trusted insights that we can prove, every boardroom in the world defaults to the person with the strongest bias, or the person that expresses that bias the loudest. And it's typically leadership, right? Typically the CEO. And so you're kind of at the whim of the CEO's bias, or at least those who have seniority. And that is what happens. And I actually heard that expressed over and over at EduWeb this year, is like, yeah, we really need this because, and then there's like, look over your shoulder and like make sure the CEO is not standing behind you. And then it's because this is what's going on behind the closed door. And it's that what they share is something, that's what they feel, right? And the word feel or believe creeps into every single decision that's made without a viable, trusted data insight. And so to your point, this gives us that common yardstick that says, my foot is 12 inches long, that foot is 12 inches long. We can now have a conversation about building a house. But if we're using yardsticks and ones and inches and we're using a meter and centimeters and mixing everything, the house is going to fall and it will never have that solid foundation. I think to your point, if we can all look at the same thing and say, okay, now we know. When we deploy Galileo, what we find every single time is there is a tectonic shift. There's not small things like, oh, okay, this is off by a few percentage points. It is 40% loss in efficiency, 100% loss here when we thought this channel was working just because we happened to spend a lot. It doesn't. And so when you remove those major obstacles, yes, the machine can run more cleanly. We get better students. We get higher scores. We get better rankings. All boats rise when we're using the same measurement.
All right, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Forsyth Technical Community College was juggling siloed systems, fragmented data pipelines, and manual workflows across marketing, admissions, and CRM operations. Then they deployed Bolt Agents, Element 451's AI workforce platform. The result? These agents handled over 80% of student inquiries independently, saving 183,060 human minutes, and cutting call volumes by 14% within just 1 week of rollout. Curious what your AI teammates could look like? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think of those sort of like sayings of like, hope is not a strategy, like wishful thinking. Like, we spend so much money on this email list that we buy every year, and we hope and wish that it works.
That's one of the biases, right? It's like, this must be true because we're committed to it. We do this on a daily basis at home, right? Outside of our jobs. We say, well, this must be true. So my mom calls me when I'm sick and says, try echinacea tea. And I'm like, okay, where'd you hear that? And undoubtedly it's Facebook. So it's just one of those things. It's just part of our lives.
Yeah, and that's what I had a conversation with somebody at an event the other night, and like they were talking like email list buys. My mind went to that example, was that like they were telling this story about like they didn't do it 1 year, everything was fine, they actually did pretty well in terms of like recruiting students, and then they like got like a slap on the hand and being like, oh, you didn't buy the emails again, like, and it was just sort of that like, because that's what we do and whatever, and like it makes probably somebody in leadership feel good because like they're doing things, they're spending money and whatever, like, and like somebody was trying to be like, oh well, even if we get a couple of students, the return on investment of like the lit, and it's like, well, but yeah, that depends on the students, and we're giving them scholarships or whatever, like obviously like it's just a very complex conversation, but like it was almost that idea of like, well, yeah, that's like what the guy who's selling you the email list is going to tell you. He's like, oh, all you're going to get is like a couple of students or whatever else. But like, just even like starting to like, break down the assumptions and the sort of beliefs and whatever else of like, if you, just try to get into like what you're doing and have all this sort of like multi-touch kind of attribution or whatever else, like knowing that like, okay, this is worth it for us. And this is why, in a way more compelling way of like, oh, well, maybe, I don't know, like, there's sort of this like fog of war between like, well, we sent them an email initially and they did end up enrolling, but like how, whatever,
therefore,
like,
right? Yes.
Yeah. So then, I think that's a big thing for me. Yeah, is that the sort of like shared source of truth, or sort of like the story that we're telling about like what we're doing, what's working, and why. I think is it's just really compelling, and I'm glad folks even like at EduWeb it sort of was like really resonant in this context, and kind of as a way to help kind of better meet this moment where there's a lot of headwinds.
There's something you mentioned earlier I want to ladder back to, which is we're talking about demonstrating GPT, and I'm just going to use GPT for all of the different LLMs, but one of the things I found myself doing this yesterday, I was knee deep. At any time I got 4 to 6 open windows that have different conversations in them, right? Or I'm like, do this for me, do this. I found myself wanting more specificity in the model and in the answer. And so I went in and I was going to ask another question, and I found myself reticent to ask them to do it one more time. And it was a very human thing. It was a very like, oh, this is going to, and I kid you not, the back of my brain was, this is a lot of work. It's going to require a lot of detail. I am hesitant to ask it to do this. My brain is still thinking I'm asking another human being to do something for me with great detail that will take them a lot of effort. And I had to say, what are you thinking, right? Like, just go ahead and like, this is what it's for. But I think one of the things that we share internally is we have to unlearn our entire lives worth of learning of how we interact with something that mimics a human being. And that unlearning is more pervasive than I think any of us realized. It's down to us saying please and thank you afterwards. It's asking for nth level of detail. It's saying, hey, you didn't do that right, or even rethinking how we can use it. I've got a channel where I'm like, it's a CEO channel, and it's like, here's everything I'm dumping in that I know about running an organization. And I'm saying, like, help me make better decisions. And I'm almost embarrassed to even have a CEO channel because I should be able to do this, right? And so I'm unlearning this concept of shame associated with, asking for help or trying to get the best inputs. And I think one thing that we share everywhere is don't stop at the thing that you're trying to solve. Take it 1, 2, 3 levels higher and ask the questions that you forgot that you should be asking, or you've never even thought you should be asking. And I think that's the big challenge for us right now is to kind of rise up and say, how else can we establish a new benchmark backwards and say, let's ask the bigger questions, not just rewrite this email or how do I make a presentation? Does that resonate? Do you have any share with that, Dustin?
Yeah, I think it's come up in a few episodes is that idea of like, if you demo one of these platforms and you get someone kind of started in just the way that you kind of interact and all of that like, you can even just fine tune if it's just like, oh, I find it just most useful, to like help me rewrite emails and whatever. But like, you can be very clear and specific around like, I want this to be shorter or longer. I want this to be more professional or more casual and whatever, versus just being like, can you write an email to my colleague about the meeting that we have on Thursday? But like, you can start to even be like, okay, that's the baseline. Then like, you could do that and then sort of like start to kind of like throttle it of like, actually a little bit more formal, actually a little bit longer, actually like, do whatever, like some of that like prompting and the sort of thinking. And I think it's just recognizing that people are just mentioning like time well spent to guide any folks that you're working with into that sort of mindset and that perspective. And then, I don't know. Yeah, I think there's a lot there because I think it's just the idea of seeing this tool as a partner and that you can really, I guess, be sort of like generous with yourself about like, I think we all could use like a good assistant, a good partner to kind of check our work and to sort of like make sure that we're communicating in the way that we want to and just doing the work that we want to do and need to do in the most effective way. And I think like, because I guess it is just so much of this feels very like ambiguous, abstract, overwhelming, or sort of like, yeah, it's just such a new thing. So I think getting down to kind of like basic principles here and all that, and then let that be the sort of fertile ground that is fertilized to then kind of blossom into just like, how do we harness these really powerful tools in ways that are like very unique and personal to us? Because I think like, they're really limitless and everything. So I don't know. I guess it is interesting because I think I'll probably be kind of marinating on this conversation, a lot of what we talked about, because I think it's just like, it's kind of hitting me. Yeah, I guess just sort of like a lot of interesting aspects around, some of these very bigger picture things, how like your organization is kind of just, getting kind of tactical and sort of how it's kind of impacting your work. And then how even just down to those basic principles of like, yeah, just our tendency to like, be polite with ChatGPT or something, like it just like
which I'm still going to do
basic human things. It's just kind of like interesting. We're just like, yeah, that's just like our tendency of like, I'm thinking like, oh, am I being rude? Am I asking too much of my ChatGPT? Whatever. It's just like, no, I mean that's a weird thing to think about, like it, but just kind of uniquely human.
It's so interesting. Is like I'm 50. I have 50 years of pattern a pattern behavior of asking something nicely of another human being, and yet now I'm asking in the exact, everything else is exactly the same, the format, the words I speak, the thought process that goes into it, but the recipient is different and omniscient and doesn't tire and will not get upset with me. And I have to change. I have to change. And the omniscient part is the part that I've yet to really fully unlock. And I'm in this every single day. And I'm like for instance, there's a Galileo. So we can now ask the data, like visualizations. I had this conversation last week with somebody. I said, the data viz, the BI platforms as we know them are going to be a fossil record in human history of this 10, 15 year period, right? The Tableaus and the Power BIs, et cetera, because that was our shortcut to be able to see data in a certain way and to serve it up in this temporal period of like 15 years. We're getting into this new epoch where you can skip that and you can just say, and we can do this with Galileo today, what was the campaign that produced the highest ROAS for the January through March, right? Not channel, but I want to know the actual campaign, and it will tell you the answer. And then right now we think, okay, that's great. Like it supersedes our need for a data visualization. It just says, here it is, and it's by this much, 13.2 return on ad spend. But imagine if I said, I have $50,000. Look across all the channels. Given there is I can only grow an organic by more than 20% this year, and the impression share for Google Ads can grow by another 60% without diminishing returns. Create a mix of media spend that maximizes output over the next 9 and 18 months. And it will actually answer that question. That is how powerful it's become. But we're asking the first level questions because we're used to saying, I want to see it in a dashboard, or I want to see this one thing. Skip the one thing, ask for everything, and let it choke on that before you back down. And I think the more that we can ask for everything, the faster we will ascend through our goals in business and in life and everything else of utilizing this technology, because that's going to really that's what opens our minds to the possibilities.
Great advice. I don't know if you have any more kind of good morsels in your back pocket there of like advice, but I think that is just to kind of give it, kind of the emphasis here in bold, circle, underline, and everything, like that idea of, sometimes like the limitations on these platforms are like just our own imagination or something, like that idea of just sort of what you're saying. It's just like, and that's what, again, like it feels sort of like cheesy or something, but it's just like, imagination will unlock whatever, but it's like, it's kind of true, because we'll have some other kind of like hangups around like, oh, that, like, I don't want to ask it to do that, like, or whatever. Like you'd have like just weird sort of things of either like politeness or whatever else, or just thinking like, oh, I'm sure it can't do that or whatever. Like, so it is just like a interesting thing. And I think if there's any other advice to kind of build off of that, or just anything else that you would like to share as we wrap up this episode.
I think it's a great place to land, which is the human element, right? Is that it really opens up the possibilities of your imagination. And I like ending on a cheesy human component, because so much of this is a little bit scary, and it's a little bit, it bristles, at night when you're like, oh my gosh, like, is my job safe? Like I saw, a CEO says this or that every morning, and we get a little more afraid of this. I think it's nice to kind of relax and rest back on, this is a thing that can make that can unlock your imagination. So think bigger, test it, push it, try and be the one that comes up in your organization or your group that someone says, wow, I never thought of that. That's amazing. Because I think those are the teams that are really going to leap forward in the next couple of years and beyond, because now it really is limited only by our imagination.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I think us as the humans being the like, unique catalyst for these tools to like have them reach their full potential and everything. So yeah, just really appreciate all that you shared, and just the great kind of advice and mindset that you brought to all this and everything. We'll have ways to connect with you and your organization. And for folks who want to check out EduWeb and kind of look into for next year, was to kind of check that out as well. But just thank you so much for your time. This was great.
Thank you, Dustin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly in your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.